some of us that may not be familiar in the conscious community with you and the work that you've done and Toltec traditions, I was hoping that you could give us a little bit of a background into what the Toltec tradition is.
Sure. Well, the word Toltec is a Nahuatl word that means artist in English. If I translate the phrase, the Toltec art of transformation into 100% English, it means the artist path of the artist path of transformation. So I'm an artist, and the canvas for my art is my life, and the instruments I use is this body, it's this mind, it's the intent or energy that animates both. So that's basically the main concept with the name. And as a civilization, it existed over 500 years ago, and it ceased to exist with either the expansion of the Aztec Empire or the Spanish Empire. But regardless, it didn't survive either one. And when you lose the center of any civilization, its survivors maintain the memory of it through traditions. And one of it is oral tradition. We share stories from one generation to another. So there's different families, different communities throughout Mexico and parts of the United States in the South that continue to teach it in their own unique way. Some people teach it as it was 500 years ago. And then there's families that adapt it with each cycle. Each new cycle changes it because, well, life changes. The lessons that applied 500 years ago may not apply nowadays, especially in the age of the internet and things like that. So as a philosophy, it's an oral tradition that's handed down from one generation, and I just happen to be one of those members of a family that taught it. Each generation, my great grandfather Don Ezequiel, his son Don Leonardo Macias, his daughter Madre Sarita, who is my teacher, and Madre Sarita's son Don Miguel Ruiz, who is my father, and myself and my brother. We continue this tradition. We and basically the whole point of all the work we do is to enjoy life, to let go of the conditions that subjugate my will, that to let go of conditional love to that degree, and to embrace life and to see myself as a living being that has the full capacity to go in any direction in life. So for us, that is the philosophy in of itself, to enjoy life, which allows us to enjoy the relationships we have with the people in our lives, to be a co-creator in the dream of us. But that only is able because I've been able to heal the relationship within myself and to heal the individual dream that is me. So for me, this is what the Toltec tradition is all about: to enjoy life, to heal the wounds, and to create a wonderful work of art, which is
Awesome.
my life.
Okay. I think that was a really in depth kind of description, and it definitely gave me some better understanding of what this is and the philosophy and why you do it and why it's important. And so, with that said, so thank you very much for that. With that said, I know that you've written several books previously, and you have The Mastery of Self. This is your latest work of
Yes,
art.
this is my third book. Yeah.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
your third book. So, a question. What inspired you to write The Mastery of Self, and why release it during this moment in time?
Well, I began to write this book when I was writing my first book, The Five Levels of Attachment. And then in the five levels of attachment, I talk about how I go up and down these levels that not only control subjugate my will and distort my perception as I go up the levels of attachment and I increase my attachment to a belief where a belief is so much powerful in my own life that I'm lose my sense of humanity, and then how I begin to open that up to let go of those conditions. And I'm talking about going from level 5 to level 4, level 3, basically going from fanaticism to internalization, from internalization to identity. And when I was talking about letting go of identity and going into preference, which is to go from level 3 to level 2, I just started going off on this tangent. I just started to continue to write. And my publisher asked me, wait a minute, you're starting to break the line. When you write a book, there's a line that allows the book to be understandable. Because if you go off on a tangent in the middle of the book, all of a sudden you'll lose your reader because the reader won't have you there to answer questions. So, from that point of view, when my publisher asked me to cut that one up, keep save that on a different file, finish that book, which is the 5 levels of attachment, and how I've been able to let go and detach and attach and detach in my life and engage. And then the mastery of self is this thing that basically, to me, it's a lot of the work we do, be it spiritual or self help or psychology or psychiatry or AA or whatever work we do. We do all this work to heal, and it's usually a inner journey, how to heal the relationship within ourselves. My dad would say, if I'm the one who's talking inside my own mind, who's listening? Well, I am. I'm the one listening. Well, if I'm the one who's listening, who's talking? Well, I am. And that's the relationship between me and me. We can call it the mind talking to the heart, or the mind talking to the body. But I'm the spirit that gives life to both, which is I'm the whole. So it's that we go into a journey of healing. So the levels of attachment describes that. It's this inner journey where we become aware of our attachment to beliefs or to conditions and the distortion of such beliefs. And when we begin to let go, when we begin to heal our own wounds, to heal our own perception, we reach a moment where we have an aha moment, a moment of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment of clarity, we go, wow, you have a choice. A moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. But a moment of clarity that's followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life. It's the moment where we choose to no longer believe conditional love. It's also the moment where we forgive ourselves for ever saying yes to conditional love. And it's also that moment where I become aware that my identity is just a mask that can only describe just so much. And who I am and what I am is much, much more. And I take off the mask. And I see myself not as an identity or the definition. I see myself as the experience of being me, the experience of being alive. Now what?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I don't live isolated I don't live isolated in a monastery. I don't live isolated in an ashram. I don't live isolated in the hill. I live in this community. I live in this dream of us. And in this dream of us, we are engaging, we are creating. So you can say that I don't live isolated in the world. I am part of a community. So how do I stay in my discipline? For example, I had a teacher once teach me this lesson, which is the the key to enlightenment is effort. That effort we use to move a foot forward, or the effort we use to create something. Well, we created the effort to heal and reach this stage where I'm able to see life as is.
Mm.
Now that I'm engaging the people in my life, how do I stay in that discipline?
Mm-hmm.
So the mastery of self is that awareness. Is the moment where I stop pretending to be something I am not, and I begin to see myself as I am. And as I do that, how I engage the people in my life who are in different stages of their own path. There are different. Some people never even started. Some people are very much advanced. And I compare it to an image of being the only sober person in a party where everyone's drunk, and there's people in there that have nursed a glass of wine for hours and they sip from the glass every so often, and they're fairly tipsy. And next to them stands a person who's in their third bottle and about to open the fourth, and they're completely blacked out but still functioning. And everyone you meet in the party is in different stages in between these two, going up and down depending on the drink. How do you stay in your discipline? How do you engage? To me, discipline is just remembering to apply that effort every day. So the party, why do we engage it? Is because the people we know is there, our family, our friends, the people in our life.
Mm-hmm.
So we engage it because we are part of this community, and I want to be a part of this community. So to me, that's where this book came from, and it came out now because, well, that's how long it took me to write it.
Yeah, you can't talk about it until you've gone through it. So I get that. I get that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, this past weekend, I was reading through the book and was having a dialogue with some friends, and
Hmm.
friends that have read some of your father's books. And so, of course,
Yeah,
they were all super excited about me being able to have this conversation with you. So, and
cool.
talking, yeah, it was really cool. So they were like, wait a minute, we've got some questions, and we're going out and going to purchase this book just based on some of the things, the passages that I read to them about. And so,
Yeah.
one of those things that came up was this concept, because most of them are software engineers, but they kind of came up with this whole thing of, how do you work out your own internal bug? And and
Hmm.
what happens when others question that bug? So you might not think that it's an issue, or the individual at the
No,
party that's
but I understand.
completely. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, but I understand the question. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Yeah. I'm following.
okay. So what, is it a feeling that hey, wait a minute, that shouldn't be there? Are there specific things that come up in life? Is it an argument? Is it a feeling? Is it sadness? What is it that tells you that you need to work on this internal thing? And how do you go about actually taking the steps to do it?
That is very cool. I love it. I love this question, especially coming from computer software people, because it's completely logical and I love it. Um, First things first, it's like one personal transformation would be so easy if we were all computers, devoid of emotion. I think but we have emotion. That's what makes it complicated. If they were all computers or just machines devoid of emotion, this would all be very logical, very simple. We'd be like Mr. Spock.
Right.
But we are human beings, and part of our perception that we have in our life is our emotional body. So you can say that if from a programming point of view, life teaches us, and we learn from events. And education is we send our kids to school to catch up to where humanity is. We can see just the history of a light bulb, the teachings of Edison and Tesla to light up a room with electricity and using either current eventually brought generations of people using what they learned, using that interaction and finding out ways that even now I'm using a device that's using the same concept that Tesla and Edison were talking about back in the little room back in the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking to you right now with it. It's gone beyond just the illumination of a room. It's now part of this conversation. So we send our kids to school to catch up to it. That's the whole point of it. So as we get programmed, we get that education. But what makes it distortion is that what motivates us. Some people we're motivated by passion. We love to do it, and when we have that kind of passion, we go to school and man, we soak up that information so fast because we have an interest in it. We have not only an attraction, we have this deep understanding that when we hit it, man, we can come up with all these things. We know the basics, and just from the basics, we can think of all these wonderful things. Right? That's passion. But sometimes we confuse the education with domestication, which is a system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual. If we live up to the expectation, we get the reward. And if we don't live up to the expectation, we get the punishment. And since we are emotional beings, that reward feels like acceptance, which feels like love, and the punishment feels like rejection and the lack thereof of love. And it's the way we've learned conditional love. So you can say that some of us confuse education with domestication because we were domestication was used like a motivator. If you live up to the expectation, you get the reward and you get the acceptance of the family, you get the acceptance of of the teachers, of the community. And if you're a son of mine, you will get all straight A's. And if you get a B or a C, then we're going to have some problems. And how can you live? And we can see how that develops. So like punishing ourselves and rejecting ourselves for not living up that image. And when we were young and in school, people domesticated each other because our parents domesticated us, community domesticated us, and we domesticate each other with, if you live up to the expectation, you're cool. And if you're cool, you get popularity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't live up to the expectation, then you're a square, you're a nerd, you're a geek, and your punishment is you're going to be rejected.
Mm-hmm.
And since we like being in a community, well, then we create subcultures. Well, forget you, jock, forget you, cheerleader. I'm going to hang out with the goth kids, and the goth kids all hang out, and we all create a subculture. Or the computer nerds get together, the drama kids get together, the environmental kids get together, and keep peace. And you remember high school? It
Yes.
gets all clicky.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have rules within ourselves. In the goth community, oh, if you listen to country or rap, you're not part of it. How can you call yourself goth and all kind of thing? Yeah, you're wearing jeans. And then we have this whole thing where we're constantly trying to live up to an image that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that motivates us. Sometimes that doesn't. That sometimes that rejects us. So there's an emotional coil already happening, and it's part of the programming. Now you have information that was imposed onto us in this way by conditional love. It's like we have a thing of imposing and subjugation, which is the nature of domestication, where I impose my will onto you, and if I am able to control you, when you subjugate your will to my point of view. And the way to do that, the way we subjugate the will of someone else, is to make them doubt themselves, to make them doubt their own capacity to make a choice, to make them doubt. And that's what tends to happen, and we have a battle. In contrast, engaging each other as equals is to respect each other's will, that your no is just as powerful as your yes, and you're my equal simply because you're alive at the same time, and we're co-creating with peace. When we meet that one person that we relate with, and we co-create together, and we have all these ideas and all these concepts. We're not trying to live up to an expectation. We're enjoying playing. We're equals, and what that means simply is that we're alive at the same time, and while we're alive, anything is possible.
Okay.
And domestication doesn't create that; it creates that image of hierarchy. So we create programming. Now we go back to emotions. If we become aware of this truth, that our emotions are real because we're experiencing it, we experience our emotions. But what may trigger them may not be real.
Okay.
Sometimes our emotion is triggered by a belief, an idea, or a concept. Because beliefs and concepts and ideas are not all academic. Some of them are created by emotions. There are words that are academically descriptive and formatted, but there are words that also have an emotional definition, and it hurts. For example, they'll call each other a nerd or a geek. Depending on who says it, it might hurt a lot, and we feel that sense of inferiority or resentment, and that emotion is real.
Mm-hmm.
But what triggered it may not be real. Like, what is a definition of a nerd? What is the definition of a geek? Well, if you become aware that it was just an instrument to create hierarchy, that was an instrument to domesticate each other, then that word was only there because we keep believing it, and whatever element may have of that. So if we see it from that point of view, that what triggers our emotion may not be real, then to honor our emotions is to honor them, that this is what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we use our emotions like a car alarm.
Mm-hmm.
Our car, it's like when you put on the alarm of a car alarm,
Mm-hmm.
and someone touches it, that alarm goes off,
Yeah.
and allowing you to know that someone touched the car. Well, if we use our emotions in the same way,
Mm-hmm.
that our emotions of anger or frustration or inferiority or jealousy or whatnot, there's just so many. Each one of these emotions has a root, and now that root has been exposed by the emotion. Once you're aware of it, because some of those beliefs, some of those conditions are there consciously or subconsciously, but once you are aware of them and the emotion has exposed them, Now you can process them. You can bring scrutiny back into it, or you can bring skepticism back into it
Right.
and say, is this real? Is this true? Where does it come from? You see, Neil deGrasse Tyson says, the truth exists whether you believe in it or not. Well,
Absolutely.
let me add something to that. Yeah, let me add something to that. A belief only exists for as long as you say yes to it. As soon as you say no to it, it ceases to exist.
Yeah.
So a belief only requires an that yes. It requires a yes to exist because you switch it to a no, it ceases to exist. So what is triggering it? Is it a truth or is it a belief? And
Well,
if it's a belief, it can be something we keep saying yes to, and it's only there because it hurts us. We continue to believe it, and to let go of it is to forgive ourselves for ever saying yes to it. I no longer believe it.
okay. So with that explanation there, then when we start to discard some of those uh, things that were domesticated or leave us to domestication, and so when we start to discard those things, how do you maintain boundaries within oneself? Because some of those circumstances may have been put in place for that survival instinct, but when you start to
Mm-hmm.
dismantle it, you have to create new boundaries. So how does mastery of self help us to do those types of
Mm-hmm.
things?
Oh, sure. Well, my grandmother during my apprenticeship used this question all the time. Do you control knowledge or does knowledge control you? When knowledge controls you, it's like a belief controlling what you say yes and no to, and your yes and no becomes automatic. You have no control of it. When you control knowledge, you're aware that knowledge only exists because you give it life, you give it meaning, you give it something, impact, power, intent with our belief, our the energy that I use to move my leg, to move my arm is the same energy I use to create a thought. So from that point of view, when we're able to reintroduce scrutiny, and basically that's, you can say scrutiny is a wonderful instrument, or uh, skepticism is a wonderful instrument, because it's a moment where if our yes and our no are automatic, then skepticism is holding back that yes, holding back that no. That I'm not going to say yes and no automatically. I'm going to hold it back, and I'm going to listen. And when I listen, I reintroduce scrutiny. If it survives my scrutiny, I'll continue to say yes to it. If it doesn't survive my scrutiny, then I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to let go of it. Now, what do I retain? How do I keep boundaries? Well, here's the thing. Some boundaries were created by conditioning. You know, that someone is inferior, you should never talk to that person or whatever. It's things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you believe that that boundary was created by someone's prejudice, then you realize then it's not really a real thing. It's not. So you discard it. But then some boundaries will remain simply because you have compassion of someone. You respect yourself. You see, boundaries are there to protect us. Now, are boundaries there to protect the ego, which is a false idea of who I'm supposed to be, and an image or an illusion of what I'm supposed to be? Or am I going to protect myself, my emotional body, myself, my physical body? Then boundaries look dramatically different.
Okay.
Boundaries from ego is basically the function of ego is to keep the illusion alive. Someone once asked me, when did we lose sight of our authentic self? And the answer is quite simple: when we prefer the illusion or the lie over the truth
Mm-hmm.
of who I am and what I am. So, from that point of view, boundaries are a huge distortion of protecting that image. But when I see myself as who I am, then the boundaries become protecting this body, protecting this emotional body, and nurturing it. Now, I can't give what I do not have. In order for me to give unconditional love or that respect, I start having for myself. So, in order to learn how to have boundaries with other people, I see it within myself. That whole idea, do unto others what you want to do unto yourself. Compassion is sharing that. Compassion is like, all right, these are my boundaries, and I'm going to respect the boundaries of another. For example, hugging.
Mm-hmm.
I love to hug people. I enjoy hugging people. But I know that there are people in the world who do not enjoy hugging. But for them, a handshake is just as intimate as a hug because that's as far as they're willing to do it. But to them, a handshake feels great. Now, if I was so blind to say that, no, everyone needs to hug me, then I'm going to miss out on that. Someone extending their hands to shake my hand, and it means the world to them. And if I can't see that, then I'm blind. But if I'm willing to pay attention, if I'm willing to listen to the person who's in front of me, then I'll recognize it. I'll be able to perceive it. So boundaries from that point of view are made by this mutual engagement of one another. And I say engagement when I simply mean interacting with one another, engaging one another, what you like, what you don't like. We listen and we respect it. Some words may be poisonous to some people, so I won't censor myself, but I will have the compassion to not use that word in their presence simply because I know it might cause pain or hurt. That is compassion. So, from that point of view, boundaries are created by the compassion we have for ourselves and other people.
Okay. Well, that's great. You know, I'm one of those individuals that's very interested in astrology. So I've done it for a
Mm-hmm.
couple of decades now. So I'm I feel the boundary part and the relationship interaction perspective. And so, with Jupiter coming into Libra in the next month or so,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question on because we know that relationships are going to be front and center as they always are. But how does
Mm-hmm.
one master their oneself without damaging relationships around you? Because as you change, as the individual change and becomes more aware of sensitive spots, it does change the dynamic. So, how do
Oh yeah.
what what's how, what's your response to that?
Well, it's. I understand that. There's. You know, I'll use this example for myself, right? So, in a real world example in my life, um, I have sleep apnea, and it's one of the things I've had. My dad has it. It's apparently genetic. And a few earlier this year, I would be waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, and it'd be 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I wake up and I feel that race, my heart just pounding, racing, 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 racing. So I did a process of elimination little by little, and then I become aware that every time I have more than 2 glasses of wine or any other alcoholic drink, that it happens. So after further review and analysis, I realized that my drinking mixed with my sleep apnea is not a good combination. That is actually creating a scenario where there might be an issue. Now, mind you, my dad suffered a massive heart attack at the age of 49 at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So I'm recognizing the pattern. I'm recognizing the pattern of my body if it's similar to my dad. And I now become aware of one of the triggers, which is alcohol mixed with wine. Now, mind you, I'm not a heavy drinker. I was a social drinker, but on that morning when I became aware of it, I chose to stop drinking, and I haven't had a drink in over 7 weeks. 7 weeks. Now, of course, that's going to be a huge impact to a lot of people around me. I announced it here and celebrating, yay! And there's people who, I've had people say, "Man, you're no longer fun,"
Yeah.
and I have friends. Even my wife says, when I made the choice, and I told them my reasons, and I said, "Honey, I can deal with a heart attack, but a stroke, I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want you to take care of me in that way anytime ever. So I'm going to let go of the strong just to reduce that percentage, that possibility." And one of the things that she and I love to do is because, on a Wednesday evening or a Friday night, we have a glass of wine together, or a bottle of wine together, where we share. It's nice little. We've been together for 12 years. Over 12 years, we've been doing it, and she got rid of all the bottles and trying to support her. She still drinks, no problem. I have no problem with it. I've got my control, and it's taken her and I some time to adapt and all that. And then I have friends who are very cool with it, and then I have friends who are not. They're not liking it. They're doing their best to tempt me, and I'm not sure what it means. It might mean they might have some projection that I may not know. Who knows? Only we can ask them. But I do know that they're trying. Now, this letting go is for my own health, for physical health, and of course mental, but physical. It falls in line with the self help type of thing. I am doing this to heal my body physically and mentally. I'm learning how to re-engage my friends. I'm learning how to, I let go of the wine, so I've been drinking pop. I've been drinking a bit more pop than usual, so I'm like, I don't like that pop. I'm gonna have to find another substitute, because water is nice, but sometimes it's nice to have something with flavor.
Right.
And it's just the willingness to rediscover myself, the willingness to reinvent myself. That's what's happening. Now, the relationships around me, it's going to change. It's going to be affected, and it has been affecting. And some for the better, some stays the same, and some of them are having a hard time because whatever reason it might be projecting on them, who knows? And all I know is that it is. Now, here's the thing: I could give in and drink, and then sabotage my body. But here's the thing: why am I doing it? Am I doing it to help me, to alleviate, or am I doing it because I am subjugating myself to someone else's point of view?
Right. And it sounds very
And
much like
that's
that rewards and domestication in a different type of a way. Um,
exactly. It all falls back into that thing. It's all about the bond. There's people who will be willing to see me as I am, and there are people who only want to see what they want to see. There are people saying, "Yeah, you're probably still drinking at home, and you're just not drinking with us." I know you already had a drink, and blah, 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 blah. And there's people like that. I haven't,
mm-hmm,
but they'll be like that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So,
Now, the thing about it is that I only control to the tips of my own fingers,
right.
and when we decide to heal, it is a personal journey. Because at first that's what it is. It's a first you start with yourself, and then little by little you go outwards. You begin to relearn. Now, for example, the first person I learned to re-engage is my wife.
Mm-hmm.
As we change our behavior, as we change our pattern, my kids are adapting it really fast. And I've gone to bars with my friends, and I'm the designated driver, and they're all talking. I'm there sitting there listening to them and going, "Wow." So, but the thing about it is that every relationship changes. There's no relationship that stays stagnant in life. Every relationship changes
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because we change ourselves.
Right, right.
So, how it impacts other people is going to be determined by how much we let it be impacted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's the time where it's time to renegotiate the relationship, or just simply allow the relationship to evolve.
Mm-hmm. I
And
love
if we're
that
not willing to,
renegotiating. I love how you put
yeah,
that renegotiating the relationship. It doesn't have to stay the same. Because like you said, you're evolving, others are evolving, and it is a renegotiation so that we can
yeah,
continue on educating and learning and all of those things. So
yeah,
I actually kind of brought that question up on the mastering yourself without damaging relationships because I see that with the Infinity Foundation, you are offering a course, or the Infinity Foundation is offering a course, Mastery of Self, where you are the professor. And
yeah.
yeah, so that's super cool. Can you give us some idea of or some background on how that came about? What?
Oh, well, an Infinity Foundation had me a couple of years back with the 5 levels, and they invited me to come back. So first, I'm honored that that happened. And the course itself is going to be, I have one part of it, which is my half.
Hmm.
What always changes is the group. The group dynamic is always impactful, and it's the most important part, to be honest with you, because I could go in there with an idea of what I want to teach, but if I listen and engage and I see the group needs something else, then I'm going to be giving that. And of course, the root is going to be the master yourself, and I'm going to teach that concept. And what it's going to be like is that depending on the questions, depending on the comments, depending on how we engage, that to me that's the source of a good teacher. It's someone that knows what we're about to share, and we're going to adapt to find not only the approach and the symbols that allows us to communicate that message or comment, is the thing that is also going to allow us to listen. And in listening, we know what better suits. So there's the element of I know what I'm going to talk about, which is the mastery of self. This is how it's basically that next step we take where we started a personal journey. Now, how we gonna continue with that journey as we engage the people in our life, how we engage the dream of planet, and from there, right off the bat, you can see that it can go in so many directions. Because we are 7 billion people after all, and every place has different dynamics, different cultures, different styles of relationship. Different. We all have a different meaning of what love is. We have a different meaning of what a man or woman is. So, in adapting and engaging, we find the constant, which is life. And from that point of view, we see how we engage life and how do we want to engage it. Do we want to engage it in the way we've always known, or do we want to make the shift? And that is going to really dictate the workshop.
Okay. That's great because, the Infinity Foundation, I was noticing, I went and pulled it up, that it's recommended for certified professionals, right, that are social workers and licensed practitioners, psychologists, but and from a certified perspective. But what's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between someone that's doing a spiritual walk and someone that's doing an education walk? Are there synergies there? How what's the different approach? And not sure if that makes sense.
Well, first the language is going to be slightly different,
Okay.
but and what I mean by that is that I wouldn't have to go over so many basic concepts. They'll know the concepts. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
And the different ones I sometimes have to go all the way to the very beginning to explain everything. Um, it really isn't. Besides that, it really isn't because anyone who is going in there, we we give what we have, and we because we can't share what we don't have. So it's this process that we have within ourselves. So we all come from different fields. We all come from different elements. Like a lot of us, even with me and my brother, for example, we have the same teacher, and my brother and I approach it dramatically different because life taught us differently. We both come from Tijuana. We both come from San Diego. We both are border town boys, men, I should say now. And my brother, he was born in the streets. He was hanging out with the crew. He went to India. He lived in an ashram. He goes into spirituality. So he teaches from that point of view. And I went to academia, went international baccalaureate. I teach from a logic point of view. But we both talk about the exact same thing. Now, in a professional setting with our professionals, that's what I say, the group will always dictate. Some of us, we go in there and we process our own, and we take what we process with others and how we engage that. Some people are looking for techniques, something to add to their arsenal, and they will find that they'll either like something or they won't like something. The real difference is that someone who is going there for self-help or going for that is they're coming more from an emotional point of view. They really have these wounds that they're ready to heal and process. From a professional, they may come with that or they may not.
Mm-hmm.
And that really makes a difference right there. Because it'll determine how much someone opens up or not. So for me, in all honesty, I treat every single one as if they're coming for help in that way. It's whether they're professional or not. I come from that point of view because that's what I'm sharing. Is that's what they're going to be sharing with their clients, with their patients, or the people they work with. Then that's where I come from. This is what I've got to give. I don't talk about what I don't know. I talk about what I do, and this is the path that I've worked for me. And it may not work for others, but if you change a word here, if you change the term there, if you change something to make it fit your life, then it works perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I like that approach as well because it's like a spiritual textbook, and
Mm-hmm.
how you read it and how you internalize it and feel it can make all the difference in the world. And so, where I was coming from, way back in the day, I was like, I want to be a psychiatrist. And then it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, I knew what was wrong with you, but I couldn't fix you. So,
Yeah.
and that parlayed into astrology and then into writing and then into this entire community, which led me to mastery of self, which is pretty awesome in my eyes, right? And so
Okay.
I was just trying to get that semblance of how far in the journey, how long down the road does one need to be in order to fully grasp the concepts of mastery of self?
Wow. That's going to vary. There's no one answer. With 7 billion people, that's going to be different for every single one of us.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I grew up with this. I was 14 years old when I first started teaching this. My dad wrote the four agreements, and it came out when I was 21 years old. I read 3 chapters of it, and I put it down because it was my dad telling me what to do all over again. That's how I saw it. That's how I engaged it, right? And then I continued with college. I graduated from college. The bubble burst. You're no longer working for grades. You're working for to create and manifest something. The whole game changes on you, and life happens. Relationships happen. Things happen, and then I pick up the book again when I'm 27 years old, and I have an aha moment with it. I see it the way other people have seen it because I was coming from a point of view that I was going through an emotional heartbreak. I was going through recovery of my dad's heart attack. I've experienced what responsibility really was. I was no longer that 20-something-year-old teenager, the 27 teenager, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I was the 20-something responsible man that was trying to figure it out, and I picked up the book, and it made sense, and I saw it the way other people saw it. Then little by little, I began to practice it. It's been 16 years since I've seen it, or maybe no, 14 years since I've seen it in that way, and I put it into practice, and it changed my life. And then I put it into my own words, and I began to share it, and here I am. So the answer to that question is that it's going to be relevant to the people who it's relevant to. Is that if they're willing to listen to it, if it reverberates in their life, if it makes them have an aha moment, they're ready.
Okay.
If not, it's just another seed that's going to blossom in the right moment.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's some good insight. Thank you. I have one other question here. At the very beginning of the book, you wrote about the Toltec warrior, and
Uh-huh.
you use the pronoun she. And I'll tell you,
She,
I had to read that 4 or 5 times because somewhere, I don't know if it's programming, conditioning, I'm not sure, but it wasn't followed by he. It was, you said she. So that
hmm
leads me to the question of what role does the female or that she pronoun play in the Toltec tradition or within the mastery of self or within your own personal? Uh,
Well, if you look at the history, just in my family, it was Don Ezekiel, and that's the thing about oral tradition. It only goes back as far as living memory, and living memory is Don Ezekiel, my great great grandfather, my grandmother's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So Don Ezekiel, and then his son Don Leonardo, and then his daughter Madre Sarita, and then Madre Sarita, her son Don Miguel, and me. So right then, the thing about Madre Sarita is that when people say that I'm walking in my father's footsteps, I have to correct them because that's not true. Yes, I'm following in the sense that I'm writing books alongside with him or after him, but he is following the same footsteps as my grandmother. So both my father, myself, and my brother, we're all following my grandmother's footsteps because you know in Mexico, there's you can still feel the taboo that the Spanish Inquisition left behind, even though the Spanish Inquisition ceased to exist or at least have power in Mexico a long time ago. The taboo was still there. It was still taboo to talk about anything outside of it, and to say you're a faith healer or a shaman or anything like that was still taboo. You're going to get ridiculed or whatever. It's still there. I've experienced it in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
So Don Leonardo and Don Ezequiel can only teach to a certain few, but my grandmother, she had a desire to teach it outside the family because that's what Leonardo and Don Ezequiel did. They can only teach to a selected few and very few outside the family. My grandmother wanted to teach it to the whole community, so she opened up a temple in San Diego, California, and in 2007 she was inducted into the San Diego Women's Hall of Fame for keeping the tradition alive, and the community recognized her. So I like saying that because it shows the contrast to her father, who couldn't, and she did. So the role of a woman as the role of a man goes as far as what the man or woman wants to do. It's passion. You can say, if my grandmother opened the gates, my father destroyed the gates by writing the four agreements, and it went all over the world. And it was a continuation of my grandmother's dream that she wanted that tradition to come alive, and she knew the limitations of her own body, of her own self, and really was a combination of the barrier of language. She only knew Spanish; she didn't know any English. And at the height of what she did, she was already in her 50s when she started doing this work. She rebelled against the tradition, and then she had an aha moment, and she changed in her 40s. She began to practice in her 50s, and she opened up a temple in her 60s. So right then and there, you already hear certain limitations, but you can by far. Hey, what happened?
Ah, yes, technology. So sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So, are we recording still?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Uh,
So I'm gonna jump so I don't want to lose it. But basically, my grandmother had this strong desire. So basically, the role of a woman, the image of the she, and the person that I was envisioning when I wrote it is my grandmother.
oh, that's
It's
beautiful.
her. It's her. But at the same time, it's also me
Right.
because I had that moment. I had that moment where I woke up and I had a moment of clarity and I saw that awareness. So it was my way to honor my grandmother, and the voice of the warrior goes back and forth between he and she throughout the book. It doesn't really have a form other than that. It goes back and forth he she throughout it, and that was on purpose because that's how I wanted to. I didn't. I know the stigmas. I know that people have that, and I wanted to show that stigma is just a belief that don't exist because we keep saying yes to it, but it's false. Anyone can engage because we have the power of our will that animates this body, and we can go in any direction in life. My grandmother taught that to me. My father taught that to me, and I began to learn that about myself, and it's phenomenal. So the warrior, we become the Toltec warrior the moment we become aware of the subjugation of our will by our own beliefs, and we declare war of it. And the war is over when we realize that we never really needed to do a war. That war only existed because we believed it, and all of a sudden I'm at peace with myself. And it's a cycle. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I go back. It's this back and forth until I hit this, boop, this, this moment, this, this, this apex of a journey where I am no longer afraid.
Uh,
That I am come to peace with fear. That I've come to peace with love, because I've come to peace with myself. I'm alive.
that is absolutely beautiful. I feel like I want to just, I don't know, hug your grandma, hug you. I'm just like, yes. It's very touching. And I think it helps us all to reevaluate and redefine what it, that a warrior doesn't have to be just one thing. It's a lot of different pieces of us, and
Yes.
those that have taught us. It's all of that coming together that makes us a warrior, so to speak. So
Yes.
great. So I think we've almost been at an hour, and so I wanted to just ask, one little final question, and I think somewhere along the way you've probably already stated it, but just wanted to make sure that we all got it. But who is this story? Whose story are you telling when we look at the mastery of self?
In this particular book, mine.
Awesome.
And what I've learned from life is the lessons that life has taught me. Because when you first start a journey, you have a teacher as the physical form. In my case, my father, my grandmother, and some of their students, Gary Van Womerdam, Heather Ashamara, among others. But eventually, the main teacher becomes life and the experience of life. The lessons I learned from my children, the lessons I learned from my friends, the people that I run with, running half marathons and marathons, the people I watch, my wife, I watch my kids, I watch my friends, I watch my publisher, I've learned from everyone. I can learn from the barista.
Mm-hmm.
It's life. It's the story of life,
Mm-hmm.
and I put it from my own unique point of view. And my publisher helped me with the edits, and there's the elements of him, and my editor, and my friend, my wife. I see her in it. I see my children in it. I see my grandma in it. It's what I've learned in my life. That's the story. Life, the teacher.
Yeah. Great, great. So thank you for sharing all of that with us and with me. I feel absolutely honored to have been able to have the privilege to talk with you today. And the book is amazing. Like I said, I've talked with friends about it, and everyone is like, "What's the name of that book again?" And going out and getting it, because it is. It speaks to everyone at different pieces or stages in their life, I think. So,
Yeah.
and
Oh, thank you so much, Kay. I really appreciate it.
oh, thank you, thank you. So, congratulations again, and
Thank
hopefully,
you.
I'll see you in Chicago.
Yay! I'll see you there.